Money, money, money in my pocket. Money, money, I know how to count it. Money, money, money in my pocket. Money, money, I know how to count it.
The BARP Charitable Trust presents a Money Matters financial tip.
An economy is pretty much a mechanism or a system where resources which are scarce are allocated among, I will not even say competing agents, but economic agents, which are households, firms, and also other members of the economy, which is the financial sector, the government sector, and the external sector. So what the diagram below shows, you have households and firms. Now, households are what you represent. You individuals live home, you have families, you have children, you have kids, some who are working, you have grandchildren who are working, and some of you are still working even in your retirement. But there are also firms which form part of this economic system. Now, what the firms do is that they hire you, which is your resource, because you provide a specific skill or a service to them, which they pay you for. Now, obviously, by you providing your skill or service, they pay you in return, but at the same time, they produce an output. So the resources you provide in this economy are the skills and services that you would have learned over the years at university, SJPP, learning online, even on the job. And in return for that, the firm produces an output, also provides income to you. Now, obviously, what happens to this income, as the income that you get from the firms, you actually spend on other goods and services, which then go back into the same firms. These firms can be manufacturing companies, restaurants, hotels, retail stores, especially for the ladies who love to do retail therapy between, and stuff like that. But then when you look at the bottom four, the bottom three, you see the financial sector, the government sector, and the external sector. Now, the financial sector is what represents the financial institutions. Obviously, injections in the financial system will be investments, which also can even come from your pockets, where you invest into the banks, or you insurance companies, or even investing in government securities and stuff like that. However, there are leakages. What we call by leakages is money that is taken out of the economy. And this is usually done through savings. So when you save a portion of your income, which I would advise you to do, you're actually taking that out of the economy from spending. So you obviously will have your savings, or whatever else is left is your disposable income to spend. Now, the government sector, which we will definitely be getting into later on in my presentation, better known as the public sector, is where there's public spending by government, where government will spend on health care, education, wages, and salaries. And by doing that, they stimulate economic growth. However, what government does on the flip side is that in terms of leakages, they will tax you, whether personal income taxes, whether taxes of corporations and companies, even VAT, excise taxes. So obviously they take it back out. And then the last part is the external sector, actually where I work, specifically at a central bank, where exports. Now, most portions in Barbados would know that we provide tourism. But I don't think most persons in Barbados know that based on the IMF classification, tourism on the external sector is considered a service. It's actually not a good, it's a service. So when persons come here to Barbados to stay in the hotels, usually, regardless of if they swipe their cards overseas or not, we are providing a service to them, which we usually receive in foreign exchange. Also, we export goods such as rum, a lot of rum, actually. Before, it used to be a lot of sugar, but that has fallen off over the last 2 decades. But then on the flip side, most Barbadians should know that we import most of the goods that we consume. At least about 80%. It might even be more, but we usually import most of the goods that we consume in some form or fashion, and we even import services. So, what are the characteristics of the Barbadian economy? Now, some of you would have heard over the years that Barbados is considered a small open economy with a fixed exchange rate. What we mean by small, we don't necessarily mean the size of the country in square miles. What we mean is that the domestic economy or the domestic economic activity generated from businesses and even persons like yourself does not significantly impact domestic or even foreign prices. So regardless to what we do here, we cannot really influence foreign prices. We actually are price takers, especially as it relates to the international market. Open. Barbados is a country that is open to international trade, not only of goods, but of services. And obviously, one of our biggest services that we provide to the globe is tourism. But we also import goods and other services. Fixed exchange rate. Everyone knows that we have a fixed exchange rate, which is 2 Barbados dollars to 1 US. Now, further on in the presentation, you will actually see how the government of Barbados actually tries to maintain this fixed exchange rate. Now, the Barbadian economy is divided into 4 sectors. It's the rail sector, the balance of payment sector, the public sector, which is both fiscal and debt, and the financial sector. Now, the rail sector is concerned with rail GDP, tourist arrivals, which feed into tourism GDP. Also, retail and manufacturing, how that is done on the ground, if manufacturing is producing any output. But then also we have the balance of payments, which is concerned with the inflows and outflows of foreign exchange, whether with goods, services, or even in the case of financial assets. Public sector, which is where most persons are usually concerned with right now in Barbados, is the fiscal and the debt. Obviously, even though they're technically 2 sectors, they're considered one because they work in hand with each other. As you will see later in the presentation, the debt actually helps finance the fiscal. And then you have the financial sector. Now, between these 4 sectors, the rail sector actually feeds into all the other 3, and then each of these sectors feed into each other. But GDP, everyone in here usually has heard about GDP, better known as gross domestic product. Now, what GDP is defined as is the total value added generated in the process of producing goods and services within an economy, which generates economic activity over a specific period of time. Now, there are 2 versions of GDP, or 2 variations. There's nominal GDP and there's real GDP. Now, nominal GDP is the total value of goods and services produced in the economy during a given period of time. However, it is measured in current prices. So year on year, regardless to what you produce, the Central Bank of Barbados will usually, through the Statistics Department, calculate nominal GDP, but based on current prices every year. And I must say that the Statistical Service plays a very important role in this calculation. Now, in terms of real GDP now, which everyone usually you will hear the governor might say the real GDP has contracted by 0.5% or 0.6%. The difference between real GDP and nominal is that the only thing that does not change is prices. So for instance, the total value of goods and services produced in the economy during a given period of time is measured at constant prices. So the prices does not change. Now, the reason this is done is to adjust for inflation. Now, I don't know how many persons in here know this, but inflation actually has a serious impact on economic activity. Now, persons in here or persons like my parents will always complain about the cost of living. Like they be like, but I can't understand why this price increase or then why the price decrease of this good, but then it jump back up. That is actually linked to inflation. But as we will go further in the presentation, you will see exactly what inflation is and what are the possible causes of it. Now, before I go any further, a lot of persons sometimes get mixed up between what is growth and what is development. And they work hand in hand, but they're not the same thing. So economic growth is an expansion in a country's ability, such as Barbados, to produce goods and services. Usually when you have economic growth, that means it's positive. is an increase from year to year. However, if economic growth is negative, is a contraction, that means a decrease from one year to the next. So for instance, economic growth, this is an example. Let me say economic growth last year was 2%. That would have been 2% compared to 2018.